Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Alt HR The Shift. I'm Marnie Robbins here with my co host, Mindy, the amazing Hong Koop. And today we're talking about something that affects just about every organization, regardless of industry, stage, size, you name it. And that's managers. In today's shifting work environment, we spend a lot of time talking about leadership, culture, and employee experience. But at the end of the day, most of these things show up in or don't in everyday conversations managers have with their teams. That makes or breaks, in my opinion. And that's exactly why we're excited about today's guest and someone who's spent their career in just this. Stacy Lademar is a fractional learning and development officer who helps consumer-facing businesses build managers who can lead. Before she trained leaders, she was one. As a divisional manager at Lord & Taylor on Fifth Avenue in New York City, she oversaw 9 managers and over 100 associates across several floors, learning firsthand the gap between knowing leadership theory and leading real people is where most managers actually get stuck. She has since trained leaders at organizations like Walmart, Royal Caribbean, and major senior living operators, and is John Maxwell certified speaker and coach. Her signature workshop, the Manager Conversation System, that's so cool, teaches managers the 3 conversations nobody trained them for: feedback, difficult conversations, and coaching. Stacy, welcome to The Shift.
Well, thank you. Sounds like I've done a lot of stuff when you say it.
You have done
You
a lot of stuff. That's why we're so excited to have you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
So I'd love to start by the way we always do. What got you here? So basically, what's the storyline that led you to dedicate your career in helping managers become better leaders?
Well, like you said, I was a manager, right? I started off in a store where I did everything wrong, if I'm being honest, right? I did everything myself. I was scared to delegate. I was scared to do all of those things. And I worked hard enough that I got promoted anyway until I couldn't, right? Until I had too many people working for me and I couldn't do anything myself. So I did what I advise other people to do. I took the leadership classes and learned how to be, a better leader. And I just remember driving home one day and thinking, I really was good at my job today. And I just thought, well, that would really be nice if everyone could feel that, right? If everyone could drive home, because I truly believe, and people argue with me about this, I truly believe that everyone goes to work every day and they want to do a good job. And I know that people are automatically thinking about that difficult person that they work with, but they're just being difficult because no one gave them the tools to do it the right way, right? So I want everyone to have that feeling. And I feel like, or I know that if managers are good at their jobs, then that trickles down, right? We all go home and we talk about our bosses, whether they're bad, good, indifferent. So if we can make better bosses, we can create a better working experience for everyone.
I so love that, Stacey, because I literally came into CHAR through social work, and I thought, surely, my hypothesis was better workplace, better communities, better society. If everyone truly felt seen and valued and the best version of themselves at work, they have a sense of self-worth, and that's then modeled back to their families and to the adolescents within their communities, because we're not born with that. We're not born even being with a sense of self-worth. That's modeled to us with the adults in our lives. And so I just like that just got me like my little inner soul just really excited to hear you say
Aw.
that. But what I love what you're saying, and it goes back to, so we're not gifted with the leadership muscle when we're like promoted into the role. What I love what you said, which can often be missed, is so I took a lot of training and a lot of classes to be able to step in, to be capable of being able leading to a point. I went home and I said, that was a great day. I feel like I'm great at my job.
She worked hard and got promoted anyway. And I
Yes.
bet we have a ton of listeners who feel that exact way. Yeah. Sorry,
Right.
keep going.
Right. And yet don't have but in most workplaces, this is the very thing that they've cut out, the
Yeah,
training.
I was very lucky that, I had that. I remember there being like a board of classes and you could sign up for which classes you wanted to attend. I don't know that a lot of places have that these days. I worked at Royal Caribbean in 2020, right before COVID, because that was when you wanted to work for the cruise industry, and they had it. Yeah, they had that. But other than that, I don't know that a lot of companies do offer that training.
So In the work that you do now with organizations, what is one of the biggest blockers then? Is this like one of the blockers, the need for them to realize that they need to see this as a need?
Yeah, I think that people really believe that some people are just born leaders. And that may be true, but that doesn't mean that if you're not, you can't learn. You can always learn. And we promote people because they're good at the technical thing. We might even be the best at the technical thing. And now all of a sudden we have people that report to us and we don't know how to talk to them. And, when we were a great individual producer, right? So we just think everyone's going to be like us. Right? No one had to teach us because we were so good. And that's why we got promoted. I remember when I first was a manager of managers, I couldn't believe that I had to still have these conversations with them because these are managers. And I remember going to my HR VP and I was like, well, when I was a manager, no one had to tell me that. And she was
Mm.
like, well, that's why you're a senior manager now, right? Now you have to help them get there. So,
And what's interesting about that too is we have a lot of conversations with, that the introduction of AI into the workforce too. They're forgetting how to have those really good conversations. Are you seeing a little bit of that out there?
I'm seeing that. I saw that recently with myself, actually. Since I talked to you last, I consider myself a pretty early adopter of AI. I remember 2 years ago, using it to help me write my emails. And it started with me writing an email and putting it into, AI and saying like, okay, clean this up or tell me if this is okay. Then it like over time morphed to me like, okay, this is kind of what I want to write about. This is what I want to start. Can you like finish it? And it changed to me being like, hey, write an email about that. So, like, about a month or so ago, I was trying to text somebody and I didn't want to go to the thing I was invited to. And as much as I'm on LinkedIn and I like all of those people that post no as a full sentence, I've yet to been able to do it myself, right? I want to like say, okay, this is why I can't go to the thing. And I'm trying to word it on my phone and I don't have my AI on my phone. And I realized I can't even write this text anymore. So I have given myself from the communicating piece of it. It can still help me with my formulas and my spreadsheets but I've given myself a little ban on AI for communication. And if it happens,
Mm.
it's happening to other people as well.
Yeah. Like, because what I'm hearing you say is you went from it being a thinking partner to it just doing the
Mhm.
work for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like, okay, write an email to this or like,
Hmm.
do this instead of being like, okay, here's the email that I wrote. Can you clean it up for me?
Yeah.
So put that into the management because I've done the same thing, Stacey. Like, honestly, even with my LinkedIn writing and whatnot, like, I started to go to the dark side, so to speak, as far as what was going and really have had to check myself and also get back to you like communication. You like writing and whatnot. When did you forget how to do that, But that makes me think of in the manager and leadership context, what muscles do you think we're at risk of losing
Mhm.
in that kind of developing world of AI assisted
Well,
communications?
I focus my business on consumer facing businesses like retail, where I came from, like senior living, where I've worked, the last few years of my career, restaurants. So you're on the floor, you're on the front lines. You don't have time to run back and look at the thing to tell you what to say. And by the way, like, can we talk about trust? Like, can we have any kind of HR conversation without talking about trust? How are you going to build trust if you're not sharing your own thoughts, right? If you're not getting to know the person because you're running back and like having the AI have the conversation for you. So I think that, they're in these industries, you really, you can't rely on AI because you're on the front lines. You can't, you have a resident in front of you, you have your customer in front of you. You have to be able to have that conversation. It's not all email in those industries.
I love the connection to the decrease or decay of trust. The less you are who you are, the less you're able to connect with someone in that way. And then there's a level of care then. Like if you're not being you, and so then how are you able to then extend care? Because the AI doesn't know the person in the same they may know the symptoms, they may know some of the health things that the individual's going through, but do they know at the core of who that person is? Hopefully, if you're in the senior living facility, you get to interact with them every day. Hopefully, you've gotten to know the core of who they are and are interfacing with them at that level, not at the symptom level, not at just like responding to a request. Like you're responding knowing who that whole person is. Is that part of it?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely part of it. Another thing that I talk about conversations a lot, but I'm also certified in DISC, right? And we know
Mhm.
that what motivates Mindy might not motivate Marnie. So I mean, I suppose you could. I know that there are probably AI models, right? Not the ones that, I use, but that you can, maybe you can put everyone's, oh my God, I'm giving someone an idea now. You can put everyone's DISC profiles on there in there and say, oh, what's the best way to talk to Marnie about XYZ? You could plan it, but at the end of the day, it's just you, right? You and the person having the conversation, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully, you're not
Yeah.
sitting there with like the screen next to you typing away.
Right. How are you seeing leading as a manager within the organizations that you're working with shifting from like what used to work versus what isn't? And how are you helping then managers show up differently? Or maybe it's a callback to ways that they used to be and have lost. I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's always, the managers that are like, okay, well, my title is manager, right? I have that positional power. So people are going to listen to me because of that. But that's never been true, right? That's that's
Right.
that's never been true. There, maybe are a small part of people that are like, okay, they're the boss. I have to do what they say. But there's also that difference between commitment and compliance, right? We want people that are committed. They do it because they want to do it, right? Not because they have to do it. They're going to perform at a higher level when they're committed to it. So getting that is, through communication, like getting people to understand that, hey, this is my mission. This is where I'm coming from. These are our goals. This is what we need to accomplish. And this is why. And all that is done through communication.
Because honestly, our profiles are shifting based on extrinsic energies throughout the day anyway. Like the way that our profiles and who we are as people show up in a million different ways throughout every situation. So I can empathize with the way that it's like, managers need to be able to have and people leaders need to be able to have that muscle to be able to walk alongside their team members, etc. What do you think is the biggest blocker for those managers and team leaders and respect to like when I think of even trying to get them to the training room or to the virtual training room or get them to just spend the time, like what do you think the biggest blocker is for them for their intrinsic motivation?
We also have a culture of busy, right? Everyone you talk to talks about how busy they are. It's like a badge of honor. I'm so busy. It's like, yay. So everyone, even if they're not busy, they think they're busy. I'm too busy for training, right? And I would have, leaders at Walmart that the training program was 4 weeks long. Sometimes you would have the leader not wanting them to attend 4 weeks. Say, I can't have this person away from my building for 4 weeks. So you need to have the leaders buy in as well and even come to the training. One of the things in my last company, the training was really successful. The CEO, there was a new CEO, and he basically said, or he did say, he said, I've inherited all these problems that would not have been problems had somebody had a conversation 6 months ago, 5 months ago, 4 months ago. We need to bring somebody in that can teach people how to have conversations so those things won't blow up. So him being on board and him being at the training and, obviously wasn't at every training, but he, was at the first couple and he introduced every single one, even the virtual ones. I had him up there. Like they knew that this wasn't just, okay, learning and development is doing this. This is going to be the culture at this company.
Oh, and I love what you're talking about with commitment. It's and versus compliance. I'm also sensing underlying tones of usually if we go into a compliant way of managing, we're thinking more in the short term, like stick carrots and sticks. How do I get this immediate response versus commitment with trust is your long-term savings plan. Trust is like over time. Every moment is building towards that, is credited in a trust bank account to
Mhm.
maintain and increase that level of commitment over time. And so I often, when you're in a busy mindset when everyone says, how are you? I'm busy now, not good. It's like, I'm busy.
Yeah.
And so when we're in that busy badge of mindset and we're thinking about commitment, How do you help managers hold the tension of short term and long term?
That's a good question. I'm thinking about, I have an image of a piggy bank in my head from what you said about the trust bank. And I'm just thinking about like, it takes however long to build trust, right? You're putting the pennies in the bank and then you can lose trust like that, right? You just, that's like the smashing of the piggy bank. I can't get that image, can't get that image out of my head. But
No,
But
well,
I,
now it's emblazoned in mine
it's,
as well. So
and
we're,
I'm just
we're
seeing the
good.
hammer as
yeah,
compliance.
yeah, yeah.
Boom. Busy compliance. So whatever that behavior is, or, a manager having a bad day and not taking a breath or a moment and coming in hot versus taking a step back and thinking about,
You know, if there's enough trust in that bank, you'll even let that go, right? If there's enough
right,
trust over time and, Marnie's having a bad day and you're like, this is not like her, you'll let that go. But if you're
100%. That's
coming
such a good
in
point.
every day walking on eggshells because you don't know which version of your manager you're getting, I personally would rather have a mean manager every day than have a manager that, like, I don't know which of their faces they're going to show today, right? That to me is scary. Like,
Mhm.
that would not be the environment that I would want to work in.
It's like walking on eggshells,
Mhm.
and that's what we talk about the carrot and stick, but it's also the weight of our movements and the weight of our team movements through the through the organization. What I mean by that is like, are they having impactful, intentional movement, or is it all a defense mechanism? To avoid the manager who comes in hot or cold on any given day.
And I don't know that, the managers realize that, especially new managers. I don't think, they're just people, right? We're all just people. We're all just, going about our day. I remember one time I was, walking the floor, at Lord and Taylor, and I heard, like, I walked past an associate whose, I guess, daughter was visiting, and she was an older woman, and she whispered, and she's like, that young girl is my boss's boss. And you don't see yourself that way. You don't know that, like, there's people, you're the boss. People are looking up to you. People are viewing you. People are, they're judging you. And, in some cases they're going to emulate you. And it's a lot of pressure, right? It is a lot of pressure. And one of the good things is that, if you do mess something up, you're going to have another opportunity to do it the next day. Like, that's what I say, when I teach the feedback class, like, there's always an opportunity to give feedback. So I'm going to teach you how to do it this way.
Mm.
They're going to go back to your, your store, your community, your restaurant, and you're going to do it the way you did it yesterday because you've been doing it that way so long. And then you're going to remember, wait, I learned it different. And it's okay because you're going to have another opportunity to give that feedback in an hour. And you will get to the point where it's now your new normal is to give feedback, in this way that changes behavior, or if maybe you don't want to change behavior, maybe it's recognizing behavior and it's, and that's what you want to do.
Yeah. And well, I mean, I think that's the catch too. So how do you then support? Because, there's like follow up required then, like as they're trying out this new behavior to reinforce it. Like, what is like your tips for building that reinforcement?
So, we talked about this before, right? I'm a big, SBI person,
Hmm.
situation, behavior,
Yeah.
impact. I always
So
feel
good.
bad. Yeah, I always feel bad telling the story. I had a boss that I think she really meant well when we left at the end of each day today. At the end of each day, she'd be like, great job today, or thank you for today, which sounds wonderful. But like what? Thank me for what? Like what specifically did I do that you want me to keep going? So, like you said, it's like anything else. It's like a muscle. You just kind of get used to it.
Yeah.
There's so many situations where a person's boss has said wonderful things about them to me. And I've
Right.
talked to that person and that person had no idea.
Right.
And the
Right.
boss was a nice person. They just thought they knew, right? We all think we wear our hearts on our sleeves, but that's not the case, right? People
Yeah.
need that reinforcement. They need to know they're doing it the right way.
Yeah. And I love SBI, but I still talk about SBI and surprised how many people have never heard about that model, Stacy. I think it was probably, and I would definitely date myself. I was thinking it was when we still had manager training in organizations, we would hear about models that were similar to it. But then as we moved into an era of where we don't need leadership development anymore, I think we've lost sight. And so as we start to see some of these newer managers being promoted, it is not uncommon for someone to be like, what do you mean by SBI? So for those in our audience that aren't familiar with SBI, could you spend a little time breaking that down and giving a practical, and I love the thank you example, but maybe like say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so, it's situation, the behavior, and the impact. So, what specifically is the situation? Something that drives me insane is when somebody says, "Oh, they have a bad attitude." What the heck does that mean? What was the situation? When you were ringing up that customer and they said XYZ, you rolled your eyes, you huffed and puffed, you did what was the situation? The customer was in front of you. They were taking a long time to find their money or their credit card, and you had a line, they had a line behind them, and you were rolling your eyes and visibly impatient. So that's the situation, and that's the behavior. That makes the customer more nervous. Now they're going to take longer to find that credit card, right? And hold up the line even longer. And that's not the service that we want to give, right? So then you have your situation, you have your impact, you have the situation, the behavior, and the impact. And then I would take it one step further and figure out, well, what are the next steps? Now, what do you want me to do? Right. So now, in the future, please try to have patience, smile at the customer, greet the customer, talk to the next person in line, say, I'll be right with you. What are the next steps? And if it's something positive, keep up the good work or reinforce it. I appreciate that. So all of those things. And the impact can be on anyone. The impact can be on the customer, right? The impact could be on the rest of the team. The impact can be on the company, however it is.
Yeah. And I think what's so powerful about this is like that's where it helps you take a moment because what you started with was an emotion with a manager responding to their emotion from what they observed. And it helps them as they start to think about the situation. What is the actual behaviors I observed? What are the facts? And now we're going to have a conversation about the facts versus how I am generalizing a feeling that I have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it makes me think, like, I have a confession. I always had a hard time giving feedback, still to this day. And I think a lot of HR professionals probably have that secret. We teach it, we promote it, right? We're like, no, we need to, you hear radicals are thrown all over the place and stuff. And I'm like, that's just not me. Like, I have a hard time with it. And the SBI method in particular was the one that allowed me to almost disassociate who I am or personality, but disassociate in a good way because you're being kind on the person but hard on the problem, right? And that allowed me to be kind and continue to provide feedback. So I think that core part, like, just, yeah, like SBA is probably my oldest tool that I've taken with me, even as an HR pro.
I love
So
that.
it's like bringing sexy back. So it's like, how do we bring the old and make it new?
I love that you used the word kind. I was in one of my jobs, I was interviewing. I posted about this on LinkedIn once. I was interviewing for a position. The position went away. They asked me to come anyway at a lower level. And when that position opened up again, they would give me that position. So I didn't walk around telling all my new coworkers, hey, I'm going to be the next, whatever boss, right? So 6 months later, that position opened up. I got the job. Other people were not happy because none of them were given feedback as to why they weren't ready for that job. Our boss was the nicest man in the world. He would walk around and be like, hey, Mindy, there's my girl. How are you? Hey, no one ever got any feedback. So, you think you're being nice by not giving that feedback, but you're not being kind. Does that make
Right.
sense? Like
Yeah.
you're not
Yep.
truly being kind. I use the example of the person with the thing on their tooth, right? You think you're being nice, you're not going to embarrass them. They're going to get home at the end of the day and they're going to be like, how long did I have this lettuce in my tooth? So you weren't being, right? You weren't being kind.
Yeah. And I love that too because it's putting more commitment, trust dollars into that piggy bank over the long term. And because it's also I think about, commitment as also how that's tied to, if we take a step back, really quality motivation. Someone recently reminded us of what are some of the key aspects of quality motivation. And the three things that stuck with me, and I'm sure there's much more, was really autonomy, connectedness, and then competency development, like progressing, being able to have like feeling that I'm progressing. And like what that was just reminding me of feedback is it's helping build autonomy. You're giving feedback to someone for them to like actually go and change their behavior to something else. And it's building connectedness between you and that manager because you are being kind and you're giving me the opportunity to build on my competency, to be better in this role and to improve myself. And in order to then really dig into that commitment, because now when you're coming to me with feedback, I want to hear it. Like, because it's going to make me better.
Did you ever do that exercise in a training where everyone has to give one word? They have to think about their best boss and you have to give one word that describes them. I do
Yes.
that. I do that and I like flip chart it. And then I always
Yeah.
note that there's almost never anyone that says, well, they were really good at their job. It's always they were patient. They listened to me. They told me when I was doing something wrong. They
Hmm.
communicated to me. Like the word communicate is on there again and again and again.
Yes.
That is what makes a good boss. Somebody
Hmm.
that communicates and lets the person know how they're doing rather than somebody that, you think you're being nice, but you're really not because now that person isn't going to get that promotion because they didn't have that opportunity to fix that behavior.
Yeah.
Where that specification comes in too, like, this is popping into my head, like, when you talk about, like, the very general, like, "Hey, good job, attaboy, attagirl," at the end of the day, it reminds me of the Princess Bride movie, like, but, where he says, "Good job, Wesley, well done, I'll most likely kill you in the morning," that, like, it feels like that to me a little bit, but I think where from a quality factor standpoint, you talk about like these three conversations. I don't want you to give away your formula, but let's talk about the moments that matter, the feedback that matters, and developing that trust. Like, what are some of those moments where you see like that's a prime opportunity to provide stellar feedback that's going to increase that trust bank?
Well, when you can catch somebody doing something right, right? You don't ever want to be the manager that the person only hears from when they're doing something wrong. And then you also don't want to be the but, right? Like, you don't want to be the person that's like, okay, you did these 9 things right, but where is that, right? Let each conversation stand on its own.
Hmm.
Build trust if you're, the butt, or if you're the person that only comes to them when something isn't right. You got to let them know what is right as well, or that will not build trust. And as long as you're always, if you're consistent with giving feedback, you can have like a culture of feedback where it's not hard, like you were saying before, like, oh, I'm embarrassed, but it's hard to give feedback. It is, right? It still is even for me. Like I tell myself, I'm like, when I have a difficult situation, I tell myself, okay, you've got to have this, you've got to have this conversation now if you are who you say you are. I was doing a new higher orientation in a company that I was new at, and we had different vice presidents coming to speak. And one vice president came and talked about this program and said, you really, really need this program to work. You need to be all in. I understand that it's expensive and that it's, difficult and that, we don't always like it, but it's a key to our success. We need to be all in. Then they left. The next vice president came in and said, okay, if we do X, Y, and Z, everything will be good. And then we won't have to do the other program. So I've got 2 different vice presidents telling my new hires a different thing. If I am who I say I am, I got to go talk to these vice presidents because I don't care if they do the program or if they don't do the program. But I care that my trainees are getting a consistent message, right? That wasn't an easy conversation for me to have. And I even said that. Like, I even was like, okay, I'm new. Like, I'm not happy that I have to, but if I am who I say I am, I've got to tell you that, this is what happened. You said this, she said
Hmm.
this. I don't care which one it is. Just get on the same page before you talk to my class again because it makes them
Yeah.
confused and the impact because it confuses them.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I love when what you're saying is this is a continuous conversations. This isn't because you stack when you're like probably not having real time conversations. So when you're working in the industries where it is happening real time, this is where we're on the floor. Often, like I working in tech, or I have the you're in person, but also the Zooms where they're running from thing to thing. Do you find in environments where they are in person, do you see that real time feedback happening more often and more naturally? Or do you find them also fabricating other excuses like, well, I'm just in back to back meetings?
Well, I think in those situations where it's customer facing, it's harder because you're not going to give the constructive feedback. You should not be giving the constructive feedback
Right.
in front of somebody else.
Hmm.
So if you're on the selling floor and there's a line of customers or there's, a lot of customers around, you can't say, hey, Marnie, can I talk to you for a minute? Right. And so you might have to have it later. And that's
Yeah.
the first excuse, right? You still want to try to have it within 24 hours, right?
Hmm.
Because not saying something is saying something. If I let this
Yes.
behavior go, and that person knows that, oh, wait, that wasn't how I was taught to do it in training. Or, somebody else sees somebody do something wrong and knows that the manager didn't have the conversation. So, wait, so now I'm going to take the shortcut that they took because I saw that they did it and I saw the manager see it and there was no conversation about it. So it's actually, kind of harder in those customer facing situations because you could do the good job. You could do that right in front of everybody, right? Oh, great job with that customer. You're really patient with them. It might be a little awkward with the other customers
Yeah.
around, but
Yeah.
you have to really find that. And the longer you go without doing it, the more of an excuse you give yourself.
Yeah. So, what are your tips then for carving out that time, for creating the space for that time?
Well, I mean, this works for me. I love a list. I love crossing something off a list. So one of the things that I tell managers is to put on their list, catch somebody doing something right, like go out of your way, to catch somebody doing something
Mm,
right. One of the things that we ask in the class is, have you ever not had the conversation and had the problem go away by itself? And there's only one person in all these classes that I've, taught that said, well, I did because they quit. But honestly, he said, and, to his credit, he said, I've always felt bad that I didn't have that conversation with them because now he took it with him somewhere else.
mm.
Even harder for him to fix it because he's not going to necessarily take the feedback from the next person because he's going to say, well, my last boss didn't have an issue with that. Right.
And it also makes me think about performance reviews. How many I mean, this really does tie into performance review, the ultimate, like, conglomeration of feedback, like, for if they're done in a old, antiquated way, that these people may have not got the feedback in real time, but then
Yeah.
come to their 6 months later to their performance review, and it's like, "Oh, yeah, remember on April 19th, you" like
And that right? And that
right.
happens.
It does.
Like that happens. A review an evaluation should never be a surprise, right? Should never be a surprise. There's even a school of thought that, if you did your feedback, right, and had your coaching conversations regularly, you wouldn't need an annual review, right? They kind of
Yes.
put
Yeah.
they put that in there because it's the one way to make sure that somebody's getting something. But who even
Yeah.
knows, right? How
Right.
good that conversation is. When I was at Lord and Taylor, I would, and I shouldn't have had to do this, but I would want to see all of my managers' reviews before they gave them to them, because then you have the people that give everybody across the board like a solid or a meets or whatever it is. They don't want to give the bad review because that scaring of having the conversation that doesn't go away because it's an evaluation. So you have people, right, that now not only were they not told that it was an issue, their last review was great as well. There was something, I want to say it was at Macy's. It could have been, or maybe it was, I think it was at Macy's and Lord and Taylor, where if you didn't make your credit goal, you took 10 points off of the review from the top.
Hmm.
It's black and white, right? I had managers that gave people that 10 points. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what are you doing? Like, they didn't make their goal. Like, Marnie was running around like a crazy person, getting all her credit, opening all those credit cards, right? And, Mindy didn't do it. And you're giving Mindy the same points you're giving Marnie. What's happening here? Right? Because, right, they don't want to have those conversations.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we
Talk
need to
about
teach them that.
compliance versus commitment. Like the performance review to basically solve for no
Yeah.
feedback,
Yeah.
compliance,
Yeah. Yep.
no commitment.
Should not be a surprise.
Yeah. So is it then because I love how you say 24 hours because one-on-ones don't always
Mhm.
happen in 24 hours. It may be the next best thing. Like if we have regular scheduled weekly one-on-ones, like if you can't get to them before that, like okay, but like carving out time within 24 hours where they're not in front of customers and that I can imagine how hard that can be.
So, I want to emphasize that this is for a feedback conversation. This isn't a difficult conversation. This isn't like a
Yeah.
thing where like their job's on the line and we're real stressed. This is
Right.
just a feedback. You saw the thing, it was done really well. You want to let them know, or it wasn't done up to standard. You want to let them know. So it's just like a quick, like SBI, it's just a quick, like 2 minutes. It's not like the whole, big, okay, this is a real difficult
Right.
conversation. I have to tell Mindy she didn't get the promotion, or I have to tell Mindy that, where her position's being eliminated, but we're going to move her to another department, right? That's like a tougher, longer conversation. I'm talking
Yeah.
about, hey, I saw you when Mrs. Smith came to you really upset about the activities being canceled today. And you explained to her that there was a leak in the room and you were really sorry and you were going to make sure that you had extra of that whatever the activity was that you really liked the next week, and you really heard her and really, I really appreciate what you did to make her, feel seen in that moment.
I love
How
that.
long did that
I
take?
love that
30
additional, like, it
seconds?
doesn't
Yeah.
have to take
Yeah.
time. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to take an hour.
Mhm. No, like, I'm talking about, like, a feedback conversation because, like you
Yeah.
said, there's different types of conversations.
Yes. Yes.
Feedback, there's the yeah, and I would be scared, like, you don't wanna save all of that for the one-on-one. People won't wanna come to their one-on-one. They're gonna get, like, here's a list of, "Oh,
Yes,
on Tuesday you did
exactly.
this, on Wednesday you did
Yes.
this," right? The
Yes.
one-on-one should be, like, a different kind of a coaching, "Okay, you tell me, like, what's going well in your world?"
Love that, because what that does is repositions managers to walk alongside their team members
Mhm.
and not over them. And so by providing the gentle guidance and the feedback in as real of time as possible, that's super important. From an HR perspective, though, the most of our listeners are in HR or people ops or people pros. How do you think they can best, support this type of environment or the leadership training? Like, what's one thing they can do? Because we've seen these budgets decrease, we've seen feedback slow down, etc. How can HR professionals, like, what's one good small step they can do to help their organizations kind of reinvigorate or re-embrace that type of environment?
Well, they can model it themselves, right? Like they can model it themselves. I always say give feedback on the feedback, right? Like, you just went to this training, right? Everyone's in the room in front of me. You've gone to this training. Now you're gonna see your managers, like to the senior managers, you're gonna see your managers, are they doing it? Are they not doing it? Bring it up in your one-on-ones, like, reinforce it and see how it's going. Make sure that they know that, this is the expectation. And then before you know it, you'll have like this culture of feedback where it's just the way that it is. Everyone gets feedback. Everyone knows where they stand. The evaluations aren't a surprise. It just happens because, it's from the top
Right.
down. Everyone believes in it.
And the way that Marnie, I love the word that you use, guidance, because then I think it becomes guidance in what we're talking about. Because sometimes we're overthinking the feedback. But it's just like, we're like in our brains, we're making it bigger than it is. But if it's just this SBI 2 minutes guidance of something I observed and hey, let's quickly check in about it. It's being able to provide that coaching, that advising of how someone can show up a better version of themselves.
Yeah, and the more you do it, the easier it is, right?
Mhm.
Like you're like it's the okay, your team member now knows that they're going to get that correction or they're going to get that praise. So it's not as big of a deal as okay, Mindy never talks to me and she came over and she told me I did something wrong the one time she talked to me, right? So there was a post on LinkedIn about a situation where there was a new manager and I guess I don't know if it was an office, I think it was an office, but there was a new manager. Did you see this? And they would through Teams or whatever ask like one of their people, everything okay today? Like every day they would check in with that person and say, everything okay today? And that person just took it as a, what's going on? Why do they keep checking
Mhm.
up on me? What's happening?
Yes.
And eventually it led to like an HR complaint and like a whole thing about like she felt like she was being harassed. And the manager, probably new manager, just was checking in through Teams instead of having a conversation where you can see the inflection and you can know that it's just somebody, wanting to check on their team. But she was like, what's going on? No one ever did this to me before. What's happening? So,
And that's where context is, like, so important, right?
yes.
Of like, "Hey, I'm checking in because this is just what I do." A lot of times, like, I'd like managers to have manager style guides, when a new employee starts, like, "This is how I communicate.
So good.
This is what you can expect of me," and then hopefully they can give you information about how they operate as well. But it is that context piece can really go awry if you don't, it's like you're saying, like, clarity is huge. Context is great, especially in feedback.
When
Yeah.
you use those style guides, because I think they're a great idea, but I also think that not everybody sees themselves as they actually are. Have you
Ooh,
ever
good
seen
point.
anything like that? Like I've had people that'll be like, "You can be direct with me. You can tell me exactly how it is," and I'm thinking, "No, I can't. You'll cry." That's
I'm a
why.
crier.
You know, like, have you ever done disc and you'll see somebody
Mhm.
a report and they're like, "Oh my god, this is so me." But they didn't realize
Yeah.
it until they read the report. They're like, "Wait, yeah, you know what? I am like that."
No, that's
There's
so
like a
true.
really cool free tool that creates a style guide, but it's based in disc and it's free. And leaders can take that and it will spit out some additional like questions about, you know, like working hours, blah, blah, blah. Like it kind of goes a little bit further, but it's based off of the disc. and like how do they best, and then they can share that with employees that are like coming in. So it's like a style guide at the root that's created from the a disc assessment, which they complete first. It
Cool.
is cool.
There was one other topic that I wanted to hit before we go up on time, and I sincerely did because we had, and you may not remember it, so if we don't talk about it, that's fine too. We may just say no, cut it. But we had talked about the role of fractional human resources and fractional L&D and where we are today, and I thought that you had a really interesting perspective on this, on how fractional HR and fractional L&D, can come in at the right time and the right place. I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit, about what you're seeing out there.
Well, I think a lot of learning and development work is project based, right? Like
Mhm.
was brought into a company as as a consultant, and they didn't have a high potential program to recognize that they're high potential managers, right? So that's something that I can come in and build, and then you have it and I can leave, and didn't have to pay me for my benefits and all of that, and that's done. And the same thing with a manager training program, right? Like when I was at a company that, if you've ever been on a cruise and they took your picture and then they tried to sell it to you, right? So I, built the photo manager training for, Royal Caribbean, and it took 11 months. And, it's a lot. You gotta, I don't know how to develop the pictures and I don't know how to do these things. I had to get, my subject matter experts involved and everything. But, if I didn't have a day job, right, it wouldn't have taken 11 months, right, at that company. So there's a lot of project-based work in L&D where you can have somebody come in because, these smaller companies, you have somebody that, you have your LMS, right? You have your learning management system. And a bigger company has somebody that just does their LMS, right? Especially if they're compliance based. They might even have more than one person. They got to make sure that, everything is loaded, that what they need to do
Mm.
in South Dakota and what they have in Virginia. And God bless those people that do that and make sure that everyone is compliant and that everyone's on time. But at a smaller company, you don't need someone just for that, but you need someone that can do it. So you have somebody that can do L&D, then you have somebody that can build that training that I just talked about for your new managers. And then just because you can build the training doesn't mean you can facilitate the training.
Right.
So if you're like these small, medium-sized companies and you want somebody that can do all of these things, and there are a few of us, but not many, then you have to pay for that. So instead of, paying a salary and benefits, you can have someone like me, come in and, build the program and, hand it off and say, okay, now Marnie is going to facilitate this and we're going to check back in a couple of months and maybe things will change and there'll have to be an update. But, here you go. Was that the conversation?
No, it was because I think I remember us saying, "Oh my goodness, it's like you just built the car and now you just need to do some oil changes." I think I remember saying that.
Yeah. That was so good. Like, build a car and then you need the oil
Yeah.
changes because, Mindy, to your point, and like this goes into a lot of work that we do at the Alt HR Hive, as we talk about like the signal and finding like this is the signal, the heat that you're feeling. And so, okay, if you have a hypothesis that like, hey, we need manager training in this area because
Mhm.
something's broken over here. Well, that's sometimes like to your point, Stacy, it's an iterative project-based type approach, and a lot of times HR leaders in particular, departments of one, they feel like a little strung up that they don't have those resources. And so I like the messaging of like, look, there are people out there that can do all of this. They probably have most of this already drafted up, but it's just, we can get that to your organization. I really loved that conversation because I
Mhm.
felt like, it gives a little hope to the people who are just trying to, get their organization moving in the right direction.
And what I loved about it, I'm remembering
Mhm.
this conversation because I think Stacy, you also mentioned what's really great is if it's a person of one, they may not have a desire to facilitate. And so if they could then use you, but maybe they're not hiring all the time. So maybe they
Uh-huh.
don't, maybe they only have classes for new hires on a, maybe it's not a routine basis, but then you could come in and help facilitate those conversations or those trainings when they need to happen. It doesn't have to be the HR person, but if that person has a desire to learn, then you can train them up on how to be able to do that if they want to. So I also loved that it was like the ability. There's such a plethora of ways in which people are able to then utilize you to up level the organization, but also the HR person should they want to or express a desire to grow in those ways.
Yeah, because I always forget that a lot of people don't like to talk in front of a room full of people like I do.
Just may have so much that they're already doing that is not something they need to add onto their plate.
Yeah. I remember was leaving one organization and I had my binder of like the 10-week manager training class that I had like literally like just finished right before I was leaving. And my boss didn't care about anything else. Not she didn't care about anything, but she was like, is everything in there? Do you have everything? She's like, everything is in there because no one else is going to be able to rebuild this. I just want to make sure that, everything is here. I'm like, everything is here. It's in the binder and it's also, on the drive.
Well, kind of speaking along those lines, because I know we're coming up on time, but you have resources. Stacey, would you mind kind of going? I know you have a downloadable of a free feedback guide. If you could tell us some more information on that and also like where they can learn more about you.
Okay. So on LinkedIn, under my featured section, there is a, feedback guide kind of goes over with some more examples, the SBI NN model for next steps. And there's even a little planner there because, to the point you had earlier, we're not necessarily comfortable with it, right? It is a new muscle. And if I'm not going to be able to do it right in that moment, I can go and I can actually, I can make copies of that one page and it's like a worksheet so that I can have that until it becomes that muscle for me. So there's that. And there's also information about my conversation workshop. And then I also, of course, have a website, stacylademar.com, very creative with that name. And I also have an appointment like next month to add a media page to it. So
Ooh,
I think that
Nice. That's
the
exciting.
podcast is going to be on there.
Yeah. Hell
yay!
yeah. Yay. Love it.
We'll put the links to in this episode. So if you haven't subscribed to
show
All Things
notes.
Jar the Shift, yeah, subscribe, follow, go to the show notes. We'll get all of that in there. But there's so much, Stacey, that you talk about that is just so in line with what we talk about with the shift in the signal framework, and making sure that we're fixing the heat that we feel. So this has been such a great conversation.
Because I think what I'm sensing in this conversation is, I mean, how cool that feedback can just be guidance when we're doing it right. Like when we see friction and starting to feel heat, if we're dealing with it real time, then we can actually have guidance that goes into a positive catalytic converter for change. But when we're not, then we actually create a compliance performance review situation that just sets fires. The friction is
Exactly.
heat and fires. So, and we are breaking the piggy bank, and we don't want that. So that's just how all the images in my head I'm being left within this conversation. But Stacey, you are such a joy. Every conversation should be recorded with you.
Thank you, ladies. You're both terrific. You're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, followers. Bye.
Bye.